unlimited resources, unlimited power. What does Jesus Christ do? He places himself into the hands of wicked men who will kill him. Going knowingly and willingly to his death in this manner, what can it mean? Either Jesus Christ is insane, or he is doing something of profound wisdom and very great worth.
You're listening to Encounter the Truth with Jonathan Griffiths. And Jonathan, we're picking up a message that we began last time looking at Jesus. The message is called The Son of Humble Authority, and we see his humility in what we just heard you describing right there. And we know he's not insane. So what is this profound thing of great worth that you're talking about today?
Well, the thing of very great worth, the thing of profound worth is, of course, the redemption of humanity through his death on the cross. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing that the Son of God, the Lord of heavenly glory, would come down and be willing to subject himself to such cruelty, such humiliation, and ultimately such suffering at the hands of the people he created. And as we observe Jesus going through this and allowing these things to take place, we have to ask, why would he do that? And the answer is that there is a very, very great purpose underlying all these things. There is a wonderful outcome that Jesus knows stands at the end of all this, and it's nothing less than redemption. And it's the most wonderful story that anyone's ever heard. It's the most wonderful thing that's ever happened.
Well, we're going to continue to look at this today from the book of Matthew. We're in chapter 17, in a message called The Son of Humble Authority. Here is Jonathan.
You'll notice here that we have a kind of side drama going on with the disciples. You'll have seen that. They have failed to help the boy themselves, and Jesus does have a rebuke for them within this. He lumps them with the faithless and twisted generation, verse 17. When Jesus succeeds in calling out the demon, the disciples sort of ask, what's up? Why did we fail? Verse 19, then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, why could we not cast it out? He said to them, because of your little faith. For truly I say to you, if you have faith like a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there. And it'll move and nothing will be impossible for you. Now, I think the section looks a little bit perplexing at first glance. Is Jesus saying that we should just be able to name it and claim it? Is that what he's saying here? If we have faith for anything that we might want, God will just do it for us, no matter how outrageous or outlandish. Move a mountain here, make a fortune for me there, pray away all my problems and all my ailments here, there, and everywhere. Nothing will stand in my way. Is that the meaning of these words? Well, no. Sorry to disappoint. This looks perplexing until we remember and recognize that Jesus is chastising the disciples for not having the faith specifically to do what he has commissioned them to do. When Jesus commissioned the 12 and sent them out on mission, back in chapter 10 of Matthew's Gospel, here is what he said to them. Matthew 10 and verse 8. He said, heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. Those were their marching orders. Jesus commissioned the disciples very specifically to engage in this ministry at this time. And while Jesus was up the mountain, the disciples were meant to be down at the bottom of the mountain, engaging in ministry on his behalf in his strength. But while they were doing that, they were not actually able to do the specific thing he had commissioned them to do. And the problem, he says, is a lack of faith. Faith is the issue. So the call here is not to have faith for anything that we might want, just believe in God is going to do it for you. No, the call is to have faith for the specific things that God has given us by his word to do, the specific acts of obedience that he has called his people to. That is very, very important to see here. And it's important to reckon with their lack of faith within this. Clearly, there is spiritual power available for the casting out of this demon. Clearly, Jesus is strong enough to do it. Clearly, he was able to empower his servants to do this on his behalf. But they don't approach the situation in a posture of faith in Jesus. We can only imagine that they went into it with either two postures. One is a posture of absolute doubt. We look at the situation, it's very, very messy. Obviously a powerful demon here doing a lot of damage. We're not sure if the Lord is going to come through for this one. Or worse, and this is the alternative, they approached it in a posture actually of self-reliance. Oh, messy situation, we got this one, leave it to us. Either way, They weren't trusting the Lord and his power to do what they'd been instructed to do. And they failed. They fell flat on their faces. And I think there's a great lesson here for us within this. The Lord calls us, each one of us, to follow him, to pursue holiness, to make disciples of all nations. He calls us very specifically in recent verses to deny ourselves and take up our cross and follow him. Those are some very, very specific instructions concerning the nature of the Christian life. Some specific calls on our lives if we are to follow Jesus Christ. And we may look upon those things and the challenge of those things, and we might feel daunted by them. Holiness, that's too hard for me. Evangelism, far too scary. Self-denial, simply impossible. And we may think to ourselves as we hear the call of Jesus Christ upon our lives, we may think the Lord cannot make this happen in my life. And it's a lack of faith. Or worse, we may look on the challenge of the word of Jesus Christ and think, yeah, holiness, evangelism, self-denial, I've got this. I'll be fine. And if that's our attitude, we are sunk before we've set sail, before we've left the harbor. We are finished before we've begun because the flesh is so weak and we're so self-deceived. Now, again, think context. It is no mistake that this incident takes place right after the mountaintop. These disciples who stayed at the bottom, they need to learn the lesson of the Transfiguration. They need to learn that Jesus truly is the Son of the Father above, the one to whom has been given all authority, the powerful one whom they must trust. But while Jesus was at the top of the mountain being shown in his glory, these disciples were at the bottom of the mountain failing to trust his power. How does Jesus exercise his great power and authority when he comes down from the mountain? Well, first, by showing mercy to the suffering. Next, the Son, he exercises his authority by submitting himself to the cross. Verse 22, notice it with me. As they were gathering in Galilee, Jesus said to them, "The Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and he will be raised on the third day." And they were greatly distressed. Now, it would be one thing if these words were merely prophetic, a foretelling of what was going to take place. Jesus simply saying, look, I know what's going to happen next. But we need to remember that these words are being spoken in the shadow of the Mount of Transfiguration. Jesus is the divine Son. He is the glorious one. No, he has the power over these events. He has divine power. And so when he says that he is going to be delivered into the hands of men, he is saying that he has decided that he will be delivered into the hands of men. He has chosen to submit himself to their cruelty and abuse. The divine Prince of Heaven is placing himself into the hands of wicked people. He will allow them to kill him, knowing all the while that he would rise. Now, I wonder if you've ever considered what you might do if you had all the capacity in the world to do anything you wanted to do. If money was no object, if power was no problem, what would you do? If you were one of the richest people in the world, would you choose to buy something perhaps? Would you do what Elon Musk did and buy a social media giant? Perhaps not. Would you do what Henry Ford did in his day and buy a vast swath of pristine rainforest in which to create your ideal world? I don't know if you are aware that he did that. It's an interesting side plot in the great story of Ford Motors. Henry Ford had quite a fixed social vision for society, what an ideal society ought to look like. And with that vision fixed in his mind, he purchased a chunk of rainforest in Brazil, named it Fordlandia, of course, what else would you call it, and set to work building his utopia, which ended up coming to nothing in the end. Virtually unlimited resources, great power. What would you do? Unlimited resources, unlimited power. The divine glory of the mountaintop, the commendation of the Father. What does Jesus Christ do? Well, I'll tell you. He places himself into the hands of wicked men who will kill him. Now, powerful people can do some very, very crazy things. Fordlandia was an ill-fated exercise. Other titans have made some bizarre moves in their time. Going knowingly and willingly to his death in this manner, what can it mean? Either Jesus Christ is insane, or he is doing something of profound wisdom and very great worth. It's interesting here that Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man in verse 22. I don't know if that stood out to you in any way. The Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men. This is actually Jesus' favored way of referring to himself in the Gospels, and it's quite an interesting title to use, the Son of Man. It certainly emphasizes his humanity in the incarnation. That's the most basic thing we can say about the name. But if we are attuned to the heritage of the Old Testament and the world of the Old Testament, it comes out into greater relief, and we see a richer layer, I think, of meaning. Perhaps most significant in terms of background is the great vision of Daniel chapter 7 and the hope-filled prospect of a ruler who will bring order to a dark and often chaotic world. This is one of the most remarkable chapters, actually, of the whole Bible. You don't necessarily need to turn there now, but let me just remind you, if I could, of the vision of Daniel 7. This is Daniel 7 and verse 13. Daniel says, as he reports on this, "I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man. And he came to the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom the one that shall not be destroyed. With the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man." Now, Jesus has just been in the clouds of heaven, as it were, on the Mount of Transfiguration, in a moment that resonated very, very powerfully with this vision. Not its final fulfillment, of course, but as a very powerful preview of what is to take place. And in calling himself the Son of Man, Jesus is pointing both to his humble humanity and to his coming glory, to his supreme authority as the appointed ruler of all things. But this Son of Man, we discover, will suffer before he reigns. He will die before he rises. He will go to a cross before he returns in glory. This is how the Prince of Heaven, the Son of the Father above, this is how he uses his great power and his great authority. He descends from the Mount of Transfiguration and immediately begins his journey to the cross. Now, why would he do this? What is his strategy? Well, it's the heart of the gospel message, isn't it? Jesus looks upon a humanity ruined by sin. He looks upon a young boy oppressed by demons, a father in the agony of heartbreak for his child. And within this, he sees a microcosm of a suffering world. And he knows that the only solution, the only defeat for Satan, the only cleansing for sin, the only reconciliation with the Father would come through his death in the place of sinners. And so he marshals the power and the authority and the resources that are his as Son of the Father above, as the glorious one of heaven, and he places his life in the hands of wicked men who oppose him, that he might die the death that is needed for the salvation of a lost and suffering world. He dies the death that is needed for the salvation of a lost and a suffering people like you, people like me. And he does so in order that we might respond to him in repentance and faith, that we might receive the salvation he gives. I wonder, have you done that? Have you done that yourself?
What a powerful question that we pause on. You're listening to Encounter the Truth with Jonathan Griffiths, and maybe you're asking yourself that question. You realize that you've not received the salvation that Jesus Christ offers to you. You've not responded to that, but you'd like to today. I hope you'll contact us here at Encounter the Truth. We have staff who would love to talk with you, answer questions, to pray with you, to introduce you to Jesus. You can reach us by calling us at 1-833-998-7884. That's 833-99-TRUTH. Or you can also contact us through the website, encounterthetruth.org. Well, if you joined us a little bit late, we're in the book of Matthew, chapter 17, looking at verses 14 to 27 today. Let's continue the message. Again, here is Jonathan.
The Son, he exercises his authority by submitting himself to the cross. Next and finally, the Son, he exercises his authority by seeking to avoid offense. Jesus and the disciples now travel on to Capernaum, verse 24. When they get there, as often happens in their travels, they are confronted by a disgruntled member of the religious establishment. The person charged with collecting a religious tax, a tax for temple and priest alike, the 2 drachma tax. This person comes up to Peter and asks, "Does your teacher not pay the tax?" Peter says, "Well, yes, he does." And this exchange, it prompts a teaching moment from Jesus, verse 25. "What do you think, Simon? From whom do kings of the earth take toll or tax? From their sons or others?" And when he said from others, Jesus said to him, "Then the sons are free." Remember that the tax in question here, the 2 drachma tax, it is a specifically religious tax. It is not levied by the state, by the Romans, but rather by the religious authorities. This is a religious levy for the temple. Now, that's just important for us to file away, because we don't want to mishear Jesus as saying that Christians are free not to pay taxes to the state. Much as we would love to take that as the main point from the sermon and walk home today, canceling our tax filing for next year and this kind of thing, we don't take this verse and kind of note it at the bottom of our correspondence with the Canada Revenue Agency or the IRS or whatever as our explanation as to why we as religious people won't be needing to pay income tax this year. Sorry to disappoint. No, this is a specific religious tax for the temple. Remember again, Jesus has met with his Father on the Mount of Transfiguration. He's been declared by the Father to be the beloved Son. And so the point here is that as beloved Son of the Father, he is free from obligation to pay temple dues, religious taxes. He's part of the divine family. The Godhead, the Father, does not tax the Son. He doesn't need to pay. This is all still happening within the memory of the Transfiguration. We're coming to terms with the realities we've encountered on the mountaintop. Jesus is the divine Son. He doesn't pay taxes linked to his Father's house. But the question has been raised, and it's a sensitive issue. Rabbis and priests are exempt from this tax. Other religious groups don't like this tax. People are watching, people are listening. Now, it is another potential opportunity for leaders to take offense at Jesus Christ. What's he going to do? What will be his disposition? What will be his approach? I think that what happens next year is absolutely fascinating and deeply revealing of the character of Jesus Christ. Just notice it with me, verse 27. However, not to give offense to them, Jesus says, "Go to the sea, cast a hook, and take the first fish that comes up, and when you open its mouth, you'll find a shekel. Take that and give that to them for me and yourself." What's Jesus doing? He's going to make provision for the tax to be paid. And his reason for doing that is so interesting. It is very specifically to avoid causing offense. The religious authorities expect him and his disciples to pay. Jesus doesn't need to pay. He's the Son of the Father. But it matters to him, it is significant to him, it is of weight to him that he should take care not to cause offense. Very interesting. Now, we need to be just a little careful here, of course. Jesus is very willing to offend when it's needed. He's willing to call out sin, to call out ungodliness, injustice, hypocrisy. He is more than willing to do that when it's necessary, no question. But here's the thing. He has no interest in causing offense for offense's sake. He has no interest in causing offense just to prove a point, just to assert his authority, to make clear his personal importance. He's going to make it clear in due course that the whole temple system actually has had its day. He will make it clear that a fundamental shift has come with his arrival, but he sees no need, evidently, to cause a stir when perhaps the time is not right. Now, the humility and graciousness of Jesus within all this is made all the more striking by the means that he employs to pay this tax. He sends Peter to the seaside, tells him, hey, go fishing, okay. And he insists that the first fish he catches will be the one fish in the sea with a coin in its mouth sufficient to pay the tax. And the point here, I think, cannot be missed. Jesus Christ, he is sovereign over all the world. He is the Lord of Lords. By the very miraculous means that he employs to pay this temple tax, he actually proves once and for all that he does not need to pay the temple tax. This is God himself, and surely God does not pay the temple tax. But such is the humility and the graciousness of Jesus Christ that he performs a miracle in order to pay a levy that he is more than entitled not to pay. He pays it for himself, and then he covers the cost for his disciple too. And he does all this to avoid causing offense. It's extraordinary. It strikes me that far too many Christians seem to go out of their way to cause unnecessary offense. And it seems to me that far too many Christians claim to do so in the name of Christ or for the sake of Christ. Now, don't get me wrong here. The gospel is offensive to the sinful heart and to the worldly ear. There is plenty about you and plenty about me that will be offensive and unavoidably so if we belong to Jesus Christ. But here's my fear. My fear is that some of us will add unnecessarily to the offense of the gospel and will occasionally do so with unusual energy and zeal. We can do it by kind of standing on our rights or by standing on what we imagine to be our rights. We can insist upon being recognized or granted special consideration for religious scruples. We can insist that rules that apply to others don't apply to us because our faith in some way gives us a pass. We can be sometimes difficult and obstinate if we're not very careful. But how important it is to learn from the Master that there is something commendable and God-honoring about taking steps, about making an effort, about standing back from our rights and doing what is needed to avoid causing unnecessary offense. Now, this is an area, it takes great wisdom and it takes great discernment. Notice that no principle was sacrificed here by Jesus, no sin committed to avoid the offense. It was simply a matter of Jesus refraining from standing upon rights that were his. It was simply a matter of submitting to custom and to the authorities that were in place and doing so to avoid a scandal. That's the force of the language here, actually, and a distraction to the work of the gospel. So let's ask the question, where might you and I be causing unnecessary offense? Often we can do so actually out of a sense of pride. Pride will drive us. And it's so interesting that that's precisely where Matthew goes next, and it's what Jesus will tackle next. In the very next verse at the start of chapter 18, we will find the disciples discussing the question of who is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And we imagine that they might well be hoping that, in the list of greatness, their name might appear pretty high up, apostles, disciples of Jesus Christ, early in the gate, all the rest. But Jesus, who is actually greatest within the kingdom, has shown gracious humility in this profoundly revealing moment. And I think as we look upon him, we can only see how foolish is our pride. And we can only say with reverence and with awe, what a Savior is he. What a gracious Lord. What a humble ruler who exercises his authority in such a way as this, showing mercy to the suffering, submitting himself even to the cross of shame, seeking in humble graciousness to avoid unnecessary offense. May God give us grace to walk in the steps of our Master.
Jonathan Griffiths here on Encounter the Truth in a message called The Son of Humble Authority. And if you want to go back and listen to this broadcast again, you can do that at our website, encounterthetruth.org. Well, Encounter the Truth is a listener-supported program. We're able to be on the station because of your generosity. And as you give a gift of any amount this month, we want to send you a book called An Anchor for the Soul, written by Paul Mallard. And Jonathan, what's this book about?
Well, this is a book about walking through trial while trusting in the Lord. It's grounded in Psalm 22, where the psalmist expresses that agony of facing real trial, but it points us at the same time to the Lord Jesus Christ, who entered into suffering for us and in our place at the cross of Calvary.
Well, we want to send you a copy of this book as our way of saying thank you for your financial support this month. You can give online when you visit our website, encounterthetruth.org, or call us at 1-833-99-TRUTH. That's 1-833-998-7884, or encounterthetruth.org. You can also write us at Encounter the Truth, 2176 Prince of Wales Drive, Ottawa, Ontario, K2E0A1. Or in the U.S. at Encounter the Truth, 215 North Arlington Heights Road, number 102, Arlington Heights, Illinois, 60004. For Jonathan Griffiths and our producer Mark Bretta, I'm Steve Hiller. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us next time.